Did you know that retiring at 55 instead of 65 actually increases your risk of dying by 89%? You've been sold a dream that is literally a death sentence. Today, we are talking about the math of misery. I'm Jace. I lived the Silicon Valley dream only to find myself drowning in a black hole of depression at Lake Tahoe. Here is the truth. You hit your number, you quit your job, and then your identity flatlines. You need a survival map for post-fire life so your freedom doesn't turn into the clinical death of who you are. Subscribe right now if you want to survive your own success. Let's get into the real meat. So, let's look at the math. And I don't mean the fun math, the how many days until I'm on a beach in Bali math. I'm talking about the math of misery. You've been sold this version of the American dream where the finish line is a number in a bank account. You think if you just hit that 4% withdrawal rule, if you just stack enough millions, you've won the game. But here's the thing, you haven't won, you've just stopped. And in the biological world, when something stops, it starts to rot. It's like a cinematic trope where the hero finally retires to the farm, but then the credits roll because there's nothing left to watch. You need to look at the data, and I mean really look at it, because it's terrifying. There's this massive study from Shell Oil, and it's backed up by the British Medical Journal, and what they found should keep you up at night. If you retire at 55 instead of 65, your risk of dying, literally just dropping dead, goes up by 89%. Think about that. You spend 30 years of your life working to buy time, and the second you finally buy it, your body decides it's time to exit the building. You think you're rewarding yourself with leisure, but you're actually signaling to your biology that you're obsolete. You're sitting there, looking at your portfolio, feeling successful, while your internal systems are basically filing for bankruptcy. And it's not just about your heart stopping, it's about your mind. The research shows that the second you stop engaging with complex problems, your cognitive decline accelerates. It doesn't just dip, it tanks. It declines 3 times faster than if you were still in the game. You see, your brain has this thing called neuroplasticity. You've heard the term, right? You think it's this magical thing that helps you learn Spanish or play the guitar. But there's a dark side to it. If you don't give your brain a why, if you don't give it a mountain to climb or a fire to put out, it doesn't just sit there like a parked car. It starts to atrophy. It's literal self-cannibalization. I mean, your neurons start to eat themselves because they have nothing else to do. You think you're resting your mind, but you're actually just letting it starve. Here's the thing you have to understand. Your brain is a supercomputer designed for high-stakes survival. You are the byproduct of 4 billion years of don't die. You were designed to solve problems. You were designed to hunt. You were designed to build. You were designed to fix things that are broken. You were absolutely not designed to sit in a lounge chair for 30 years. When you take away the struggle, you take away the very signal that tells your cells to keep living. You're trying to run solitaire on a machine built to simulate the entire universe. It's a hardware-software mismatch, and it's killing you. You think that million-dollar cushion makes you safe. You think that 4% rule is your shield. But that math only solves the survival problem. It solves the where do I get my calories problem. It does absolutely nothing for the evolutionary problem. Your bank account doesn't talk to your mitochondria. Your cells don't care about your ROI. They care about purpose. They care about stress, the right kind of stress. Most people, they spend their whole lives trying to get rid of stress. But when you finally get rid of it all, you realize that stress was the only thing holding you together. You're like a bridge where you've removed all the weight, and now the whole structure is just drifting away in the wind. You have to realize that leisure is a trap. You've been conditioned to want it, but your biology is literally allergic to it. You think you want to be done, but being done is just a polite way of saying you're finished. You have to ask yourself, if you're not solving a problem, why are you even here? Because the math says that if you don't have an answer to that question, your body is going to start looking for the exit sign much faster than you ever imagined. You wanted the dream, but you accidentally bought a front row seat to your own obsolescence. And that is the real math of misery. So you're sitting there, you're on this massive timber deck overlooking Lake Tahoe, and honestly, it's exactly what you told yourself you wanted. You've got the crisp mountain air, you've got the silence, and you've got this bottle of 1997 Napa Cab that cost more than your first car. But here's the thing, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It tastes like copper. It tastes like bitter uncertainty. You take a sip and you realize you aren't actually tasting the oak or the dark fruit. You're tasting the fact that it's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning and you have absolutely nowhere to be. You're realizing that the dream is starting to feel a lot like a very expensive cage. You see, there's a specific kind of psychological math to how we consume things, and your math is currently broken. You have to understand the difference between what I call the reward and the sedative. Back when you were grinding, when you were pulling 80-hour weeks to hit that exit, that glass of wine at the end of the day, that was a trophy. You earned that. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a long, meaningful sentence. But now, when you're pouring a glass before the mailman even shows up, that's not a trophy. That's just like a way to numb the silence. You're drinking because you're bored. You're drinking because you're terrified of the void. And you know it. You can feel it in your gut. You're realizing that wine tastes better when you're tired, not when you're just empty. Think about it like this. You're basically a Ferrari in a garage. I mean, look at yourself. You're this high-performance, precision-engineered machine. You spent 30 years tuning your brain, sharpening your instincts, and building this incredible engine of productivity. But now, you've got a tarp thrown over you. You're just sitting there in the dark, gathering dust. You're not being driven. You're not hitting those high RPMs. And you know what happens to a Ferrari when it just sits in a garage for years? The seals dry out, the oil turns to sludge, the battery dies. The machine literally starts to rot from the inside out because it's not doing what it was built to do. You were built to solve problems. You were built to create. You weren't built to just sit around and look at a lake. You're a $3 million piece of machinery being used as a coffee table. It's a tragedy, really. You feel your own gears getting rusty. You feel your mind slowing down, and it scares the hell out of you. And then you make the mistake of opening your laptop. You know you shouldn't, but you do it anyway. You hop on LinkedIn or X, and you see it. You see your old VP of engineering, some guy you used to mentor, and he's out there raising a Series B for an AI startup that's literally changing the way the world processes data. You see these kids, these 24-year-olds, talking about LLMs and neural pathways and moving the needle on a global scale. And you're sitting there in your cashmere sweater, counting the waves on the lake. 1, 2, 3. You feel obsolete. You feel like legacy code in a world that's being rewritten in a language you don't fully speak anymore. You're looking at these people building the future, and you realize you're just a footnote in the past. You're watching the greatest technological revolution in human history from the sidelines because you decided you wanted to relax. But you're not relaxed, are you? You're restless. You're twitching. You're looking at your bank account and seeing all those zeros, and for the first time in your life, you're realizing that the math doesn't add up. You have all the points, but you've lost the game. You have the money, but you don't have the mission. You have the status, but you don't have the struggle. You have the view, but you don't have the vision. It's a weird, hollow feeling, right? Like you're a ghost haunting your own success. You look at your hands and you realize they don't do anything anymore. They don't build. They don't lead. They just hold that wine glass while you wait for the sun to go down, so it's socially acceptable to be as tired as you feel. You're beginning to understand that unlimited free time is actually a very sophisticated form of torture for someone like you. You don't need more rest. You need a reason to get out of bed that doesn't involve a golf club or a boat. You need to be the Ferrari again, but you have no idea where the keys are or if the road even wants you back. And that, my friend, is the most expensive realization you will ever have. You've reached the summit, you've cashed the checks, and now you're staring at the horizon, wondering why you feel like a laptop with a broken screen. You think you want to rest, but you don't. You think you want to stop, but you can't. Here's the thing about your brain. You've spent decades training it to be a high-performance, heat-seeking missile. If you suddenly take away the target, you know what happens? The missile doesn't just float there, it self-destructs. You've seen those guys, right? You know the ones. They retire at 45, move to a beach, and within 6 months, they're drinking gin at noon and arguing with strangers on Reddit because they've lost their edge. You can't let that be you. You need a new mission. You need what I call the anti-retirement protocol. See, you aren't actually retiring, you're just pivoting. You're moving from work for survival to what I like to call a high-stakes non-profit project. You have to treat this next phase with the same cold, calculated discipline you use to climb the ladder at big tech. You need a framework because without one, you will rot. You will literally feel your IQ points dropping every time you mindlessly scroll through a feed. So, you're going to build your IQ guide dashboard. You've heard the term, sure, but you've probably seen the Pinterest version. This isn't that. This is the tactical version for someone like you who needs data and results. Your dashboard has 5 pillars. If you let one of these collapse, you're going to feel the structural integrity of your life start to wobble. The first pillar is structure, and this is where you'll probably struggle most. You've had a boss or a sprint schedule telling you what to do for 20 years. Now, you're the boss of a very lazy employee, yourself. You need the July 9th 12 schedule. You wake up at 7 a.m. No excuses. You don't get to sleep in just because you're rich. You get your coffee, you move your body, and by 9 a.m., you are at your desk. You work until 12 p.m. on your deep work project. You need those 3 hours of cognitive load or you'll lose your mind. You have to maintain the July 9th 12 rhythm because it's the only thing keeping you from becoming a ghost in your own house. The second pillar is identity. Who are you when you aren't the lead engineer or the VP of product? Most people in your position have no idea. You've spent so long being a cog in a giant machine that you've forgotten you're the architect. You need to define yourself by what you produce now, not what you manage then. You have to ask yourself, what am I building when no one is paying me? If you can't answer that, you're in trouble. You have to find an identity that doesn't require a badge to enter a building. You need to be a writer, a builder, a mentor, something that exists outside of a corporate directory. Then you've got connection. You think you have friends, but you actually just have colleagues. Once you leave the ecosystem, you'll realize how many of those relationships were just based on shared trauma and proximity. You need a community of experts. You need to find people who are as smart as you, but are working on different problems. You have to seek out these connections like they're oxygen, because they are. You can't just hang out with your family all day. You'll drive them crazy and you'll lose your professional vocabulary. You need peers who will call you out on your BS. The fourth pillar is purpose. You have to solve a problem for society. It doesn't have to be save the world big, but it has to be real world big. You've spent your life making buttons more clickable or optimizing ad spend. Now, you have to find a problem that actually matters. Maybe you're helping a nonprofit scale their tech, or you're mentoring kids in underfunded areas. Whatever it is, you have to treat it like a $500K a year job. You don't volunteer when you feel like it. You show up because you have a responsibility. You have to invest 40 hours a week into this. You heard me right. 40 hours. If you give yourself too much free time, you'll fill it with anxiety. You'll have to keep the pressure on. Finally, you have the pillar of challenge. You need to learn a skill that makes you feel like an idiot again. You know that feeling when you first started coding and nothing made sense. You need that. You need to feel that friction. Maybe it's a new language. Maybe it's carpentry. Maybe it's learning how to navigate a sailboat. If you aren't struggling, you aren't growing. And if you aren't growing, you're dying. You have to embrace the frustration of being a beginner again. It's the only way to keep your brain plastic and young. Now, here's the psychological math of it all. You think you've earned the right to do nothing. But the math says, boredom plus a surplus of resources equals an existential crisis. You have the resources, you have the time, and if you add boredom to that mix, you're going to start questioning every life choice you've ever made. You'll start looking in the mirror and wondering if you've peaked. You haven't peaked. You're just between sets. You have to install a time management system that is even more rigorous than the one you had at Meta or Google. You use a calendar for everything. You block out your voluntary work hours. You block out your learning hours. You treat your life like a high-stakes production environment. You don't let the rot set in. You know what the rot is, right? It's when you start wearing sweatpants at 2 p.m. and you stop checking your email. You can't let that happen. You've got to be the CEO of your own retirement. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to set KPIs for your personal growth. If you don't, you'll just be another guy with a big bank account and a very small life. You didn't work this hard to end up small. You worked this hard to finally have the freedom to do something difficult on your own terms. You have to remember, the world doesn't owe you a sense of meaning. You have to build it, brick by brick, every single morning at 7 a.m. You have the tools. You have the roadmap. Now, you just have to do the work. You've got this, but you have to stay disciplined. You have to stay sharp. You have to stay you. Look, here is the thing that nobody tells you, and I mean nobody. You think the goal is the exit. You think the entire point of this journey is to hit that X amount of dollars so you can finally say I'm done and walk away. But you have to understand something fundamental. Retirement, in its traditional sense, is basically a death sentence for the soul. It's like finishing a movie halfway through because you've seen enough of the plot. Why would you ever do that to yourself? You have to realize that true financial freedom isn't about not working. It's about the radical, almost terrifying freedom to choose exactly which burden you want to carry. Because life is a weight, You're always carrying something. You can either carry the weight of someone else's dream just for a paycheck, or you can carry the weight of your own purpose for free. And that is where the real game actually starts. Most people, they get caught in this psychological trap of the magic number. You see it everywhere on the internet. Once I have 2 million, I'm good. But here's the math. If you reach that number and you still have the mindset of a consumer, you will never be good. You will just be an anxious person with a larger bank balance. You'll be looking at the market every single morning. You'll be worried about the cost of living. You'll be paralyzed by the fear of losing what you've built. You've turned your freedom into a golden leash. You have to stop that. You have to shift your identity right now from the consumer to the contributor. Think about it like this. A consumer asks, what can I buy with my time? A contributor asks, what can I solve with my life? You have to move from the what's in it for me phase to the what can I build phase. If you treat your fire number like a finish line, it becomes a tombstone for your creativity. It's like a beautiful, expensive wreath on the grave of everything you could have been. You don't want that. You don't want to be the guy who retired at 30 and spent the next 50 years just taking up space. You want to use that money as fuel, not as a parking spot. You have to use your wealth to buy the right to do the hardest, most meaningful work of your life without worrying if it scales or if it's marketable. You owe that to the world, and more importantly, you owe that to yourself. You have to be the architect, not just the guy living in the house. So if you're watching this and you choose freedom because you actually want to give something back, not just because you want to escape, then hit that like button. It helps more than you know, and I want you to go down to the comments right now and type purpose, just that one word. It's your handshake with the universe that you aren't just here to extract value but to create it. You're shifting the identity today. You're deciding that your freedom is a tool, not a destination. You have to do this because the world is waiting for what you're going to build once you're finally free. I'm Jace, and I'll see you in the next video.